just gone 11:30, so I'll say good morning and welcome to our event today. Thank you everybody for being so prompt. The numbers are still going up, so I'll just do my introductions. My name is lleddfu James and I'm the programme lead for the Digital Health Ecosystem in Wales, and I'm really excited to be chairing this digital showcase event that's looking at our humour remote monitoring project. And I really hope that we can have some interesting discussions with you all later around how remote monitoring solutions can improve patient experience, care and outcomes. We have presentations this morning from the lead heart failure advanced nurse practitioner at Cwmtaf Morgannwg, Mandy. And then we've got Rebecca, our project lead at the Life Sciences Hub. And then finally, but by no means least, Arash from Humour. So I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping as I can still see people are joining us. I can see a number of you have already done so, but can I just make sure that everybody's on mute so that we don't get any feedback? But please, please, please do pop questions into the chat during the presentations, and we hope to have some time afterwards for some discussion. We are recording today's event, so probably best to keep your cameras off. So what we're going to do now, I won't hold up proceedings any further, but we're going to start off the session with a short video, and then I'm going to hand over to Mandy for her presentation. So Alan, can you do the video for us, please?
Sure thing.
This is where we hope technology works. It's worth the anticipation, I promise.
1 second, it should be loading in a second.
Thanks, Alan.
Is that showing for everybody?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Oh, it's disappeared now.
Wales is home to a dynamic innovation ecosystem that is helping to transform our health, well-being and economic landscape. Life Sciences Hub Wales is proud to showcase the latest developments from industry, academia and health and social care.
So Humour is a health tech organisation, and we use people's smartphones to give them hospital care, monitor their health and enable them to participate in clinical research, all done remotely. So Humour's technology shares health information between patients and clinicians. It includes a patient app and a clinician dashboard. The Humour app, as used by a patient, allows patients to submit and report things like blood pressure, heart rate, as well as things like symptoms and answers to clinical questions. Clinical teams can then review that information through the Humour dashboard, which flags automatically patients that may be deteriorating or warrant further attention.
The main challenges were COVID had hit the UK and we were unable to see our patients face to face. My nursing team had been redeployed to wards to cover COVID patients, so we were really struggling to see our patients face to face. So this app was able to facilitate us virtually monitoring our patients from their own home. So the footfall was less to our hospital, patients didn't have the fear of catching COVID coming to see us, so it was a real game changer through that COVID period.
So my mum is 65 years old and unfortunately earlier this year she was diagnosed with heart failure. But fortunately she's been able to use this new app. The impact of having heart failure alone is huge on your quality of life, your symptoms and everything. Actually using the app has meant that my mum has had access to a heart failure specialist almost on a daily basis. The fact that people can get to where they need to be in their treatment plan a lot quicker and don't have to go back and forth to hospital, particularly in a pandemic, which we're trying to avoid, it's a win-win situation.
The Life Sciences Hub Wales has seen many digital applications in the past 12 months that have enabled remote monitoring. So the Digital Solutions Fund was set up by Welsh Government with reference to COVID challenges and how we'd use technology to enable healthcare to meet those challenges. The application, in this case Humour, won that challenge and won funding to be applied to a health board, and worked with CRMTAF on development of the application, and then with Betsy Cadwaladr as well for evaluation of the application in use with patients and clinicians to enable us to determine if the app was fit for purpose for future use and adoption.
So there's lots of challenges involved with monitoring patients, communicating with patients, reaching patients, and then being able to travel to you with their heart failure condition. Now using the remote monitoring app, I'm able to see on a daily or alternate day basis the trend that's happening with my patients. I can have a look at that and decide whether I'm happy where my patient is, and it's more upstream. So rather than them not wanting to phone because they're worried about bothering me, I can see, I know this patient, I know we're heading in a direction that I'm not happy with, and I can jump onto the phone, have a video consultation with them, or call them into clinic depending on what that clinical scenario is at any given time, and reverse that trend and avoid hospital admissions and keep patients better for longer.
Well, I wasn't aware that I had had a heart attack. It's only when they were searching for something else that they told me. Since then, and with the help from my heart specialist nurse, I've been able to survive, and with her help, I keep saying this, I wouldn't be here without her help. If Vicky, my heart failure nurse, notices something not right, she will give me a call and say, I think you need some extra tablets.
The pilot has been really successful thanks to our collaboration with CRMTAF, Ganwy and Betsy Cadwaladr health boards. The clinicians have told us to spot deterioration and intervene early. On top of that, clinicians have been able to discharge patients early from hospital because of the monitoring the app provides. Patients have universally given us positive feedback too. It's helped me better manage my cardiac condition, which is so important for heart failure, and they've almost universally rated the app extremely highly and would recommend to other users.
I think this innovation has the capacity to help people across Wales, across the UK, across the world. So anybody with heart failure that this could potentially benefit.
Life Sciences Hub Wales is working collaboratively to make Wales the place of choice for health, care and well-being innovation. Join us as we make our vision a reality, and contact us at hello@lshubwales.com or visit lshubwales.com to find out more.
Thanks, Alan. So I think we're going to go straight into our first presentation now from Mandy. So I'm going to hand over to Mandy and you can do your introduction.
Good morning and thank you for that introduction. I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, lovely. So again, thank you for that introduction and very warm welcome to all joining us this morning's webinar. I appreciate your time during lunchtime. So I'm presenting on behalf of my colleague Vicky Jenkins, who is unfortunately with COVID, so I'm presenting on her behalf. I'd like to...
Mandy, sorry, we're struggling. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm struggling a little bit to hear you. I don't know if your microphone's caught in your top or anything. Fab, try. Thanks.
Any better?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. No, I can't. Yeah, so I just thought I would give you an overview. Heart failure is, so just gives you a little bit of a context into the problem we were having. So heart failure is an inability of the heart to pump effectively by damage to the heart muscle. And it is unfortunately the end point of all cardiovascular disease, whether it be heart attacks, arrhythmias such as atrial fibrillation or valvular disease. And it is a condition that is chronic and often gets worse. So here are some stark facts about heart failure. So there are around 1 million people living in the UK with heart failure, and these are only the ones that have been diagnosed, and I think this is, the tip of the iceberg really. There are 200,000 new diagnoses annually. There are around 40,000 people in Wales living with heart failure, and around 4,000, just over 4,000 being diagnosed in Cwm Morgannwg Health Board area. Acute heart failure accounts for 5% of all hospital admissions. This is huge, and it is a huge burden for the NHS. Over 2% of the total expenditure for the whole NHS budget goes to treat heart failure patients, and there is an incredibly high readmission rate. Excuse me. And this is an awful fact, but over 30% of diagnosed patients will die within 1 year of diagnosis, and that is worse than most cancers. So this is incredibly, hard for patients. They demonstrate a very poor quality of life with high anxiety and depression. These are some of the symptoms. I'm not going to go into all of them due to time. Shortness of breath. This is one of the main symptoms, and patients often tell me it's like breathing through a straw constantly, and the more exertion that they put on themselves, the harder it is to breathe. The swelling of the feet and ankles, this again is one of the main symptoms, and often patients will come to my clinic with slippers that have to be cut open because the swelling is so bad. And this obviously, is embarrassing for them to go out, so they stop doing social things, and obviously mobility is a lot more difficult for them. They have a chronic fatigue. They often sleep for 8 hours a night. They're up for half an hour and they're back in bed. Again, this means that they can't work a full day. And again, social activities are decreased. And difficulty sleeping. So this is so frightening for patients. They actually feel as though they're drowning in their own fluids sometimes. And they often have to sleep upright, because as soon as they slip down that bed, they do struggle to breathe. And you can just imagine, how frightening this is for patients. They're living alone and this happens to them in the middle of the night. So you can understand how readmission rates are high with these patients. And again, I won't go into all of the symptoms. So the treatment for heart failure. So as clinical nurse specialists, we are there to offer education and support. Patients are going to live, with this heart failure. They need to know what they're dealing with. They need to know how much exercise they can do, and they need to understand that it has going to have implications for their life. And we encourage self-awareness, and especially of any deterioration, so that our job as nurse specialists is to keep them away from hospital, keep them out of being admitted. So it's early detection of worsening symptoms for the patient, and then onward referral for pacemakers, cardiac devices. They may need revascularization, cardiac rehabilitation, and often palliative care. And I've circled this last one. So optimizing the 4 pillars of heart failure medications in a timely manner. We're extremely fortunate in cardiology medicine that our clinical trials are huge, including thousands of people. So we know the medicines that we can offer our patients, we know they work because they've been tried and tested. And recent publication from the Cardiac Network, a consensus of cardiologists across Wales, has indeed issued guidance on that we should be prescribing the 4 medicines in a staged approach, but in a timely manner. And this is what happened when COVID was the first wave of the pandemic. All of our face-to-face clinics were suspended. Sorry, let me just go into the medication a little bit more. The 4 medicines aren't just a 1-dose medicine. You had to titrate the medicines over a few months to get them to the right level for the patient. So all of our clinics were stopped. So that means we couldn't get these patients with high risk of death onto the medications. Our patients were incredibly vulnerable and often comorbid. They were older, frailer, they didn't want to see us in hospital. We'd already warned them, the news was telling them to keep away, so they didn't want to see us anyway. We had staff redeployments within our heart failure team who had to go and cover the COVID wards. We had staff on long-term sickness due to COVID. And again, the patient's complete fear of seeing any of us really. So we needed to look at novel ways to optimize our patients on their medications, but to at the same time reducing the risk of cross-infection. So, excuse me, we were really lucky to be approached during the first wave of the pandemic by Life Sciences Hub Cymru, Digital Health Wales, and a company called Humour. And they first of all approached us about starting a COVID virtual ward, but that wasn't of interest to me. I just wanted to treat my heart failure patients. So along with cardiologists, we set the parameters for the app and developed all of the parameters for blood pressure, heart rate, and what symptoms we wanted to capture. So the patients required a smartphone and they required to consent to using the app. They needed a blood pressure and heart monitor, which we gave them as part of our pilot project, and weighing scales. And then the patients on a daily basis to start with captured the relevant clinical data, and this was according to the agreed management plan between myself and the patient. And they uploaded it via their smartphone, and this connected to a web-based platform, which was the clinician dashboard, which you just saw. And this helped to identify long-term trends. So I was able to monitor their heart rate, blood pressure, their weight. So weight with heart failure, once you decompensate and gain fluid edema, your weight shoots up, and this correlates to worsening symptoms. So this was really good to be able to see this on a daily basis. And any changes to the patient's care or condition were documented in the patient's medical notes, because currently there was no interoperability between this dashboard and our current. So this is just to show you one patient blood pressure trends over a couple of weeks, and this is what I use to increase my medications for my patients by looking at these trends, and also when to stop optimizing their medications. So if their blood pressure goes below 100, for example, and they were telling me they were feeling dizzy, then this would mean I'd optimize my patients, and we would have those conversations over the phone. And again, these are the symptoms here. So this patient was complaining on the 29th of June that he had moderate breathlessness and he was coughing. So these come up in green, amber or red. So and that warrants a phone call from the heart failure nurse to ask a little bit more about the breathlessness, because sometimes it could be that they've just got a chest infection or their COPD may be playing up. So it's important to have those assessments over the phone. And of course, if we were concerned about a patient, we'd either visit them in their home, to give them high dose diuretics to keep them away from hospital, or to just monitor their ongoing symptoms. So, excuse me. So to date, these are some of the outcomes. So we've avoided admission for a few patients, again, by going into their homes and offering high dose diuretics so that they don't end up on our coronary care unit. Medication optimization time has significantly reduced by 74% in some patients. So this is huge, and this is obviously been driven as well by our parallel guidance from the cardiac network to try and reduce the time we take to get patients on the medications, because by doing that, we're helping them live longer, we're helping them keep out of hospital, and we're helping them live a better life due to the symptom burden. We have facilitated early discharge on our coronary care units because we know we're keeping an eye on their heart rate and blood pressure and weight via the app. So this has meant they've been able to be discharged a couple of days early. And this medicine compliance, we know with chronic conditions, compliance is not great. And some studies have reported 50% of patients are not compliant with their medications. And one patient in particular, he was a young chap, he was about 40, and he had very high blood pressure, high heart rate, quite a smoker, drinker. And when he started taking the medication and he was inputting his blood pressure on a daily basis, and as it was coming down and his heart rate with the medication, he was feeling so much better. And he obviously correlated this to his medication, which is the right thing to do. And he said, this is really going to make me take my medications. You know, so looking at prudent healthcare, of course, these medications aren't cheap. So that's really, really good. And there's been a significant reduction in face-to-face clinics for some patients. And this leads to a reduction in footfall in our hospital. So all in all, this app has been a complete game changer for me. We've had to redesign our service in a ridiculously short space of time due to COVID. And prior to this, there has been mumblings of digital health technology. In the Netherlands, Germany, for example, they were using this prior to COVID. So I think it was on its way. I think COVID has hurried things along. And I'd like to thank you for listening, but I have got a patient, David Watkins, who has pre-recorded a video for us. And as you know, all the outcomes are great, but it's really, really humbling to hear a patient's perspective of living with heart failure and indeed using the app. So thank you again for listening, and I'll hand you over to my patient, David Watkins.
My name's David Watkins. I'm from Treherbert at the top of the Rhondda Valley. My heart condition first started about 20 years ago. I found out that I needed a triple bypass. Then 20 years later, something else must have worn out, and I found myself filling up with water. The impact on my life was awful when I first had it, because I couldn't do things. I live in a 3-story house. It was difficult to answer the door. It was difficult to get up. You felt as if you didn't want to do anything. I knew that I had to do something about, or hopefully someone would help me do something about this. When my heart failure nurse first introduced me to the Humour app, I was quite excited, to be honest, because you take your records every day and you write down your heart rate, how you feel, your blood pressure, etc., etc. And I really enjoyed using that app every day, because when you had a good reading, it affects you because you think, oh, well, you know, you feel good about it. When I was using the Humour app, I never felt isolated from my heart failure nurse, you know, because the thing was being seen every day was kind of confirmation that somebody was monitoring my health and my condition. So that was a great thing. Right now, as he searches for wood to touch, I'm feeling great. I'm almost, because I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I said, I don't really want to say this, but I just feel more normal than when I was normal. One of the biggest upsets, personal upsets for me with my heart problem was the fact that I couldn't play drums. After I met my heart failure nurse and was on the medication that she prescribed for me, I found a vast improvement to that, and I found that I could actually go and do something that I've done and loved all my life. Now that was a massive thing for my my soul, my well-being, you know, and I can I can never thank her, actually. I just can't. I would absolutely recommend using the Huma app for this condition. Without question. I'm always skeptical of certain things, you know, and I might have been at this one until I started using it and seeing the value of it. And of course, when it went, it was like losing an old friend, you know, because I'd been using that day by day. I think I would like to have kept the app, because when you have a condition like this, it's all about confidence. It's all about confidence to work and live. It's simple as that. That's the simplest way you can put it. You know, you just want to be normal as you can, even if you were not as normal as you was yesterday. And the Huma app, monitoring that, gave me that confidence, as I said earlier, to just get up and do what I think I should do for that day. Live, really.
Thanks, Mandy, and thank you for bringing your patient along and sharing that with us. I think it's always so powerful to be able to hear from people that have been affected in this way, and that was a really good case study there. So I'm going to move on really quickly now, conscious of time, and our next presentation is from Rebecca. So I'll let Rebecca introduce herself.
Morning everyone. I think though we've only got 2 minutes, so let's good afternoon. Hopefully get this up and running. So just to quickly explain for those of you who aren't aware of the Life Sciences Hub Wales, I work for that organisation, but specifically I'm part of Digital Health Ecosystem Wales. And as an organisation, we're a collaboration between the Life Sciences Hub, Digital Health and Care Wales, and we're funded via the Welsh Government. And the idea is we bring together the stakeholders to be able to enable digital health projects to take place. And that's how this project has come about, is a collaboration between Welsh Government, the private sector, in this case Huma, and obviously working with the health boards. I'll just give you a quick flavour of the kind of work that we're ongoing at the moment in Wales. DHEW, we very much work collaboratively across industry and with the health boards. We're really interested in digital integration as our key purpose, and really looking at how we can utilise it to improve health and social care across Wales. And we do that through a variety of mechanisms. One is being able to assist in project management, like the example we're talking about this morning, but we also hold events, shared learning experiences. We're able to assist with funding opportunities. We signpost people to different support systems and mechanisms across the UK and further afield. So the Digital Solutions Fund, as Mandy alluded to in her presentation, was something that came about via COVID, and Welsh Government were really keen to work with the private sector to look at innovative ways that digital technology could step in to combat the impacts that coronavirus was having within the systems. The Challenge Fund was the idea it was a quick setup solution to be able to trial things quickly. And one of the successful projects that was accepted through this was the Huma Therapeutics app that we're talking about this morning. In terms of our role as an organisation, we very quickly needed to find health boards that were willing to work collaboratively with Huma on this project, and we were able to link up Mandy herself directly. I think Mandy actually came into this project because she was looking for blood pressure monitors, and little did she know that she was getting a lot more of it by partnering up with us as an organisation. So Mandy came on board with Cumtaf as a health board behind her. And then off the back of that, we also then were able to bring in Betsy Calwada from North Wales, the North Wales Health Board. Unfortunately, Vicky couldn't join us today, but they have been able to jointly pilot this across 2 different health boards, which are very different health boards. One is obviously situated in the South Wales Valleys, whereas Betsy is a very large health board covering a huge rural area across the top of North Wales. So the app's been used in 2 slightly different ways throughout the pilot. So I think that's really important to look at how the technology could be used in different ways. So Mandy's alluded to some of the outcomes of the pilot. So we're really pleased with one of the key things we think for us in Wales is to link back to that cardiac network in terms of optimisation. There's an aspiration within the pathway that we look at a 28-day time frame for medication optimization, and one of the things the pilot's been able to do is to reduce that time. So rather than the old way of working of clinics, which used to be weeks apart, Mandy has been able to rapidly titrate people and bring down that waiting time significantly. The data from the app has allowed for escalation of the pathways. I think up in North Wales it was about 90% of patients, the app informed that. And we've managed to see a large number of reduced numbers to hospital clinics, and we've been able to allow, one of the things that the patient feedback has told us is that it's far more a convenient way to engage with hospital clinicians than having to attend hospital clinics. The pilot phase, which ran until October, we actually had a cohort of 40 people within the pilot, and within that pilot we had 4 direct admissions avoided. So out of 4 out of 40, that's a really high percentage, and we think over time that actually we could increase that number of admissions avoided. It's improved the data and systems. We're obviously going through a state of change at the moment in Wales in terms of the development of the national data record. But this data and systems just didn't exist in the same way that Mandy's been able to track her patients. She had patient notes, but being able to see it in a live dashboard with graphs and really see what's happening in terms of trends and data with her individual patients has been invaluable to her as a clinician. And crucially, we had 100% positive feedback from patients about using the app. One of the other elements of this project that I think has been really successful in Wales is that these DSF projects were working directly with frontline clinicians like Mandy and Vicky. Mandy and Vicky do not have a team of project managers behind them. They are cardiac nurses working in the front line who have been able to adapt and bring on board their own digital technology and tailor it to them. And they are the unsung heroes of this project for me, because they have been doing this alongside their day job, alongside working in a very difficult scenario across the past few years with COVID. So in terms of us as an organisation, obviously CUMTAF are looking to carry on using the remote monitoring technologies they've been using throughout the pilot, but as an organisation in Wales, we're looking to where we could find opportunities potentially of national adoption of remote monitoring, starting in heart failure specifically. So one of the pieces of work that we're undertaking at the moment as an organisation is looking at all the other ways that different systems are working. So we're undertaking a scoping piece of work at the moment, and we're looking to create a business plan off the back of it. But we're very aware that there are lots of different ways that remote monitoring is being rolled out across our colleagues in England and Scotland. And we're looking at those examples at the moment to inform how national adoption potentially could look in Wales. So the key next steps for us is we're working very closely with the Welsh Cardiac Network at the moment, and we're reviewing with all the Welsh health boards their ongoing work and aspirations for the future. We're aware that some of the health boards have started to look at remote monitoring technology, but what we would love to do and what we're pulling together at the moment is a very quick understanding and scoping mission as to what's ongoing at the moment and what might be in the pipeline, to see if there are opportunities to work collaboratively across Wales. And that aspiration is for a joint project on national adoption of remote monitoring for heart failure. One of the challenges in Wales of us using technology is obviously the bilingual nature of our country and the need to create a bilingual technology that will work moving forward for patients and clinicians in Wales. So we're working currently on a business case that's looking to be drawn together by July as to how all the data from this pilot and all the other pilots and ongoing work across England and Scotland and other nations can really demonstrate that there may be a case here for a national adoption. And the crucial thing for this is working with our colleagues in Digital Health and Care Wales to look at how the data we're starting to collate in terms of that individual patient data readings on weight, height, weight and blood pressure, etc., can really be fed into the national data record and be part of that core data that can be drawn across from all clinicians. Because currently the app is being used as a standalone dashboard. The idea is that we need to very quickly look at how that can become interoperable with all the other systems that are ongoing across the NHS at the moment. That's my section complete. So I'm going to hand you back to Dennis.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we did have a question in the chat then from Ian around how does DHEW work with DHCW, which I think you answered very nicely at the end of your presentation there. We can explore that a little bit more maybe later on after we've heard from Arash. So Arash, I'm going to hand over to you now for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for inviting us. So my name is Arash. I am Clinical Director here at Humour and a practicing academic and clinical paediatrician here in London. As you've heard earlier in the presentation and the talks, Humour as a company, we offer remote patient monitoring that can digitise any care plan and host any research protocol. And today it's been really wonderful to share what has been probably the most exciting project that I've been involved with and showcasing the capability of the Humour platform in the specific case of heart failure. I wanted to use this time to try and convey 3 messages to explain how we got here, but also to start to showcase some of the potential opportunities that this has opened. And so my first message that I really want to emphasize is, and we've all throughout this project been really championing this, it's that more than anything, we need to be listening to patients like David, and we need to be understanding what it is that they want digital health to look like. That's not just on the clinical side, which I'll come to in a bit, but it's also about how the platform looks and is experienced by them. High quality digital health is going to need a tried and tested product that meets the needs of the patient. And I suppose the message that I want to convey is that isn't something that happens overnight. For us, it's been a really long, over 10-year journey getting to the point where we can deliver a platform, deliver digital health projects that are able to achieve some of the outcomes like we've heard in this project. Over those years, we've iterated the platform countless times using quite literally millions of different data points, hours and hours of qualitative insights. We've now at the point where we've got 1.8 million active users across our technologies. Our technologies are used in, I believe, over 3,000 different sites. And all those insights, all that knowledge, all that information has enabled us to start creating this platform that's easy and enjoyable to use. And it's from that experience that the patients have that leads to all the great outcomes that we're having. Because we know from our experiences in traditional healthcare and in the clinics that I do, in the kind of the hospital wards that I work on, the more you can do to improve patient engagement, the more you can do to help them work with you to achieve those better outcomes. And that's what we've seen in this project when we're able to build a platform that supports patient adherence, that supports meaningful engagement. You heard some of the stats earlier. So we're looking at potentially clinical optimization up to 4 times faster than previously. I think a huge part of that comes down to the fact that patients can see their results and see how things are changing as we're changing their medications and changing their care plan. We're seeing potentially up to 10% admission avoidance, about 5% sort of early discharge. Again, I think that's because we're giving clinical teams and patients the added confidence that you don't need to be in person to have meaningful monitoring and meaningful clinical input. That can now happen remotely. And we're now starting to see, certainly over a longer period of time, significant reductions in outpatient appointments. So in this particular project, almost 20% over a 6-month period. And I think that's going to increase as we know that teams get more and more familiar with this technology. And I think all of these outcomes are just the tip of the iceberg of what we can achieve. It's not just heart failure, though, that we've done this. We as a company work in a number of other clinical areas, and this learning has been so important for us to build an aspect of the product that looks at actively changing patients' medications, changing their the clinical input. But we've done similar things in other clinical areas, and I think there's a huge amount of synergistic learning going ahead. So in surgical pathways, we've identified deteriorating patients with a specificity of almost 90%. In diabetes, using very similar capabilities, we've seen metabolic improvements that are much better than any oral medication, certainly I'm aware of. And in acute illness, we've been in positions where we've been able to double clinical capacity using lots of the capabilities that we've been using as well in the heart failure deployment. I think what's really important, the thing that's universal and what we've learned so much through this deployment in particular, is how to help support adherence to care pathways. That's something that's really key. That's something that really needs to be evaluated. And what we're really looking forward to is sharing the evaluation that we've done, a mixed methods evaluation, soon in a peer-reviewed journal. The second sort of lesson that I think is really important from this project in particular is that healthcare is a team sport. This project could never have happened without the really forward-thinking clinicians that we've been working with on this. It's not at all about tech expertise. I've been with Humour for 18 months. I had no real experience in digital health before this. For me, digital health is just another way for me to exercise my passion as a clinician. And what's been really great in this project is working alongside individuals like Vicky, like Mandy, who really understand the needs of patients. That's why I think it's really important for us to be building digital health pathways like this. And I think actually nurse-led pathways like this are going to be a really powerful user case in digital health going ahead. And I think it's really great that we can show what can be achieved in these pathways as well. Mandy and Vicky will be kind of too humble to say this, but I think it's really great to see, deservedly so, that they've won Cardiovascular Nurse of the Year for their work on this. And I think it's a real fantastic testament to the passion that they've shown over the last few months and the huge amount of clinical expertise that they've provided. But it's also, I think, not just the clinical side, but the wider MDT. I'm always reminded that healthcare is about all the people you bring together from the different disciplines together. And I think what digital health is really doing is deservedly shining a light on new parts of that MDT, whether it's designers who really understand how patients are going to engage and interact with a platform, whether it's people on the tech or the data side who are able to really help with the display and the analytics, or whether it's actually understanding that user experience from a more holistic perspective. Mandy and I are clinicians, but we're always going to need that clinical expertise. But it's the designers, the engineers, the data scientists coming together that I think are going to make digital health really exciting. And for us as a company, one thing we found is in projects like this, we bring all those stakeholders together. That's really where you can see these incredibly impressive outcomes. And the final kind of lesson, and this is really where I see this going in the future, the particularly exciting bits, it's about remembering that technology needs to work around people, not the other way around. The way we've chosen to do this at Humour is trying to build as much capability and features as possible, and then giving clinical teams the flexibility and the modularity to pick what specific components they want. So we're now in a position where we can essentially digitize any care plan that exists, rather than expecting patients and clinical teams to have to change and meet based on what we as a company can offer. And there's a few different ways to do that. Firstly, it's about the capability, what the patient sees, the different data points they're asked to put in. But it's also about the way that we ask those patients to interact with the platform. It's about being flexible enough to use any device that you can to support those care pathways, to support that user experience. But it's also about being really cognizant of health inequalities, being aware of it and doing what you can to address that. And one of the things that we are doing going ahead is working on that in a number of different ways. In the first instance, it's about understanding who uses the platform and how they engage with it and make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that around half of our users are over the age of 60. I'm really encouraged by the fact that a significant portion of our users are over the age of 80. I'm really encouraged by the fact that people are actually, through word of mouth, hearing about these sorts of projects and actually going out and getting their own smartphones and finding it incredibly easy to use. I think that's a real testament to the work that many of our teams in the back end have done, but also the engagement that teams like Mandy and Vicky have done to kind of explain why this is important and to work with those patients. And I think once you recognize what that technology can do and you're willing to and accepting of the need to work around the needs of patients and clinical teams, that's when you're then in a position to use these technologies to then revisit some of your assumptions. And for us, it's not just about remote care, but actually research, and in particular decentralized research, which is now something that we're offering on the platform. And actually on the back of projects like this, we're able to now start exploring a number of previously infeasible cardiac research projects, trials that are done faster, trials that are done on a much bigger scale, trials that are done much more conveniently. We've got a number of observational and interventional research projects that directly stem from this work that we've done. We're submitting a number of grants and protocols, including things like trying to explore and then validate new biomarkers for heart failure. Because what we've done here is shown that we can use this technology to monitor those patients, we're now in a position to support research that can really explore those clinical conditions, gain that new insight, and maybe help the patients of tomorrow. So from my perspective, this has been genuinely one of the most exciting projects that I've had the pleasure to work with since my time at Humour. I think it's a great testament to the clinical teams to share our vision in trying to deliver digital first healthcare. I'm really excited to see it continue. I'm really excited soon to be sharing with you the publication of our results. And I'm really excited by the interest and enthusiasm that this has generated, not just in healthcare, but in life sciences more generally. So thank you for having us, and thank you for working with us on this project.
Thank you, Arash. That's great. It's been really great to hear from all the different perspectives of the project, because I know it has been a great success. And I'd just echo some of your comments there just around the award that Mandy and Vicky won. It was very well deserved, and we were really chuffed to see that. So that was great. We do have a few minutes available for some questions. I can see a couple have come up in the chat, so I'm going to go through some of them. There's a question here from Mandy. It comes from Annie, and it would be great to hear more about how switching to using the platform impacted your workload.
That's an excellent question. So I do have actually a graph, and I should have pulled it up, but we have been looking at how my clinics have been impacted by using this platform rather than face to face. So if before COVID, I saw my patients on a monthly basis because that's the only capacity I had. And they would have to wait a whole month before I could change their medications. I would then do their blood pressure, do their heart rate, and then prescribe accordingly. So that would be a 3-hour, round journey for patients to come and have that done. We're trying to encourage them back into the workplace, back into a normal life, but they're spending a lot of time in outpatients, as well as attending cardiac rehab programs. So they have really valued not having to come and see me in clinic. What that does mean is, as part of our NICE guidance in the UK, we need to see patients within 2 weeks of hospital discharge, because these are high risk of being readmitted. So we weren't able to do that because our clinics were so full. So because of using this digital platform and not seeing patients in my clinic, I'm able to see discharge patients within that 2-week time limit, which is hopefully reducing readmission rates. But so from a time perspective, I peruse the dashboard every morning at 8 o'clock up the state when I come into work. And then I just act accordingly on who's highlighted as at risk or with low blood pressure. and then I telephone the patient. So it, it does take time, but nowhere near as long as the clinic appointment would take. So it has significantly reduced the footfall of patients who don't need to be in a clinic. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Mandy. We have got another question for you. I'll direct this one question to you, and then I'll go on to our other speakers as well. So Nigel's asking, how were you able to monitor kidney function changes through taking their medication?
Another excellent question. So I was providing my patients with a batch of blood forms on our first. So I always met my patients face to face for the initial appointment because I needed to know if they were suitable for the app. And of course I needed to clinically assess them. And that was an hour-long appointment, so I had plenty of time to discuss everything with them. And I provided about 4 kidney function forms, and then either by email or telephone, when I was increasing the medications, I was advising them to go to a local hospital, so one of our hospitals here, to have their bloods done. And it all works really well. They're really sensible, our patients, and they generally do come to the hospital to have their bloods done rather than GP surgeries because of ease of access, really.
Thank you. Right, so I'm going to ask a bit of a challenging question now, and I think I'll direct this firstly to Rebecca and then maybe Arash afterwards. So you can be totally honest now, but what have been the biggest learning curves when it comes to working across industry and the NHS from your perspectives?
One of the biggest challenges is sometimes there's a skepticism, maybe sometimes of commercial products and a commercial sell, where ultimately what we're trying to achieve is eminently sensible. We're all aware of the capacity limits within the NHS at the moment, and equally wanting to create the best patient experience possible. And sometimes we do need to look to industry as to how they've managed to put in place technology to assist us in that, and not see it as a negative thing, but as just as how we can work positively and collaboratively together. One of the ways we were able to get this pilot up and running really quickly, I have to say, is that we did leave it a bit independent. We didn't interop with existing NHS systems for the purpose of the pilot. This meant we were able to get it up and running a lot quicker. The negatives of that, obviously, at the moment is that it is a standalone dashboard. We do have aspirations to move to a system in the future where it is completely interoperable with NHS systems. But for the purposes of getting it up and running, it meant that we were just able to crack on with it. And I think, that there is a reluctance sometimes in terms of the interoperability side to look at how third-party cloud-based stuff feeds back in through. And we're still working, I think, is the honest answer, with Digital Health and Care Wales on the API work that's ongoing at the moment as to how we can get there for the future. But I suppose for the purposes of this, it was a really good way to get in and prototype and test this in a real life environment. And I think that was the positives really of just cracking on with industry and working solely within their data remits, under data agreements and under DPIAs, of course, but being able to actually just trial it in real life scenarios rather than being held up by longer term ambitions around interoperability.
I think from my perspective, when you are working on the cusp of innovation, you do have a responsibility to prove and demonstrate what the outcome and evidence is. And I think one of the things that really, and it's the reason why I joined Human when I was looking to move into digital health, is we have this ethos of evaluating and then writing up a number of our projects. That can be quite tricky to do. It can potentially add additional work, but I think it's really important to spread that knowledge and to share within the wider digital health ecosystem what is possible. I think it's also something that our patients realistically deserve. It's a responsibility that we all have to do these things rigorously and accurately. And actually, when you've got really well-designed digital interventions like these, then it's a bit of a win-win, because you can actually show just how much of an impact that you're making. From my perspective, I think when you do that, it's really important, and it comes back to this constant theme of listening to the patient. I think it's really important not just to use the numbers about how many admissions were avoided, what was the change in kind of clinical status. A huge part of these evaluations, particularly the early stage of an intervention, is that rich qualitative insights that you get from those patients. What is it they enjoy about it? How is it changing their experience? And that's something that I think has been really important for us to understand, to continue to improve the platform, but also to showcase just what an impact this can make on individuals' lives, whether it's the testimony that you heard earlier or some of the other insights that we've got from people using the platform. I think that's the richest feedback that we can get from these sorts of interventions, and is a really solid foundation to build on this going forward.
Thank you. Ian's responded, I think, to Rebecca's point there about interoperability with a really good point. In the case that one of your patients requires care in an ICU, would it be useful to be able to share the data from the Humour platform with the new Welsh Intensive Care Information System being deployed now? So I think we can all agree that I think it probably would be really helpful to be able to do that. And then Nigel's asked another question. Again, I think this was once for Mandy. Given the age profile of the patients, what proportion had comorbidities and how were you able to integrate the care of their other conditions? Great question there.
Yeah, another excellent question. So I don't know exactly what comorbidities these patients had, but we know that heart failure patients are comorbid. You know, so I think I know where this question may lead to, and it is a concern of mine, is if you have a patient with COPD, diabetes, heart failure, and there's an app for each illness condition, then, you know, are we going to overload our patients with technology and apps, you know, and that is clearly a fear of mine as well, because then they're just going to not use any apps because there's just too many on there. And I mean, there are some, you know, that are now being bought. You can buy a cardiology app, so you can look at AF, you can look at cardiac rehabilitation, you can look at heart failure, you know, so looking at different aspects of cardiac care. But it's certainly something that we need to be mindful of, that the patients don't get overloaded with apps.
If I can just add to that, I completely agree. I think a series of point solutions is never going to be the ideal thing for a patient. And for me as a clinician, I'm often dealing with very complex cases where I need to synthesize the needs of sometimes competing comorbidities and balance that all together. The way that we are doing this at Humour is really to offer that flexibility of whatever additional comorbidities you would want to monitor in a patient to give you within the library of features and data points that we can collect, to have that ability to ask the patient to submit that data. It's why, in addition to all the work that we've done in cardiac, we have done projects in diabetes, projects in respiratory, projects in surgical pathways, because I think the future of healthcare, very much so, is going to be about meeting the holistic needs of patients. And I think if we're really committed and passionate about this journey of enhancing the user experience, what we're going to need to do, and what we are starting to do, is to start build that flexibility so that irrespective of the comorbidities and the other needs that patients have, there is a way to capture that data and you meet the needs of those patients irrespective of the therapeutic area or the care pathway. And I think it's something that needs to be driven by the clinical teams who will know the patients the best, but it's up to us as suppliers to make sure that we provide that capability. And that's certainly something that we're trying to do, and why we're building this platform to be as condition agnostic as possible.
We're pretty much at the end of our session, but I wonder if, Arash, you could just do a really quick answer. Marcus has popped a question in the chat. Are there any educational modules built into the app for the patient, or is this for data entry chatbot functions only?
So education is a huge part of the offering. Every single deployment that we have, we work with clinical teams to ensure what the best educational content for those patients are. This really needs to be a two-way relationship with patients. It needs to be, yes, they provide the data, but we as clinical teams need to be able to give them the resources and support. And I'm a firm believer that every contact you have is an opportunity to impart education and knowledge. And I think digital health, really every time a patient uses the app, we need to use that as an opportunity for them to access that resource. So if it's cardiac, we can offer a number of kind of cardiac specific educational resources. If it's acute illnesses like COVID or other respiratory conditions, we offer packages there. For diabetes, we've done something different to support kind of a 12-week intensive program. Education is a huge part of this journey, and it's going to be a huge part of how we improve patient adherence and engagement, and very much a central ethos that we have at Humour of how patients are going to really benefit from digital health.
Can I just add there as well, Delith, that as part of this app, there are links within the app for the patients to charities such as British Heart Foundation and Pumping Marvellous, and also a traffic light system so they can monitor their symptoms and know when to contact us. So there's lots of information given within the app as well for patients.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I think everybody will have found that as interesting and as informative as I have. I can't believe an hour has gone by so quickly, and I'm sure we could probably spend the rest of the afternoon asking questions. I know I did have a couple more that were sent in earlier, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and I'm sure people have got other meetings and clinics that they need to go on to. So thank you so much to everyone for your time today. That was really, really interesting. And I did put a shameless plug in the chat for our newsletter, so that if you do want to keep up to date with the progress of the project and the evaluation, etc., we will be sharing that through our newsletter and through the website. So thank you all so much for coming along today. Thank you.